Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm trying something different and I'm going to be talking about how you should learn things, and I'm going to explain the learning curve and a different way to traverse the learning curve. So let's get right into this. So of course, this is a different style of video where I'm going to be doing more of like a writing kind of thing, and you're going to see it on screen as well. So let's talk about the learning curve, shall we? So the learning curve basically has two components. One that describes how much you're actually learning with time, and the other that shows your performance output with time. So for example, that would look something like this. Let's say you have, here's just a couple of axes, and I'm going to plot the learning with time, like learning's on the y-axis and time's on the x-axis. So if, let's say, you learn something new every day, every single day, and at any given, I'm just going to take my time steps as one day, and let's just say you're learning something new all the time, then your learning curve looks something like this, right? With a constant slope, and it's just constantly increasing. You're always learning something, and for any given amount of time, if you move ahead, you've always learned something more, right? So your learning outcomes have always increased, right? So if you had a learning like this, you can expect your performance output to be something like this. So I'm just going to do that here. In fact, let me use different colors for that. So based on this kind of learning, you can expect your performance output to be, so let's just call this performance output with time. You can expect that to be something like this. Now, there's a reason why this is exponentially approaching a value. And well, it's not really exponential in a sense, but it has exponential properties. And this limit, let's just say this is 100%. 100% performance output, let me just define as a point where you can do no more. Like, that's it. You've peaked. You have reached. You have solved it. Like, that's it. It's done. There's nowhere to go from there. And there's a reason this curve is asymptotic. Asymptotic just means it's approaching that value, and it reaches it only at infinity. So in this case, the curve is going to approach it, but it will never actually reach, right? So like at some point at infinity, this goes and hits that asymptote, and you've learned everything. So this is to show that there's always scope for improvement. Now, I know there's exceptions to this, like you could say, oh, well, I've mastered filling a bottle of water like 100% of the time. Good for you, my friend. This is not for you. I'm kidding. But like, it's kind of complicated in that sense. But let's just say in general, this is how learning works, right? Now, if you have a learning that's like this, like what I just described right here, then you can expect a performance output like this. But can you actually learn something new every day? I mean, sure, you can. But if you have other things to do in life, if you have a lot of things you're taking care of, then it's going to be harder. And it's not just a matter of, oh, I can just learn something new. You also have to get them ingrained in your head. You also need to understand them really well so that you retain them and you can actually apply them to everything. Which means your learning with time can't always be like I can't constantly keep learning something every single day or every single second. And we're also human. There's other things to worry about. Like you've got to keep your mental health in check, your physical health in check. You've got to be, cognizant about all of these things. So let's just say you can't learn this much, right? In fact, let's take the worst case where you don't learn anything. Okay, here's the worst case. This yellow line right here shows zero learning. Well, it's not zero because I have put it, a certain value above, which means you are at some value of learning. Let's just call this one learning unit. I just made a unit. It's fine. So that means this is not zero, but you're at one learning unit, and over time you stay at that unit. So nothing changes. Now, what this means is that over time you're not learning anything new, but also this means that you're learning your position on your performance output curve is probably going to be something like this over time. Can you note the difference here? It's the same kind of curve. So the difference is your peak performance output has now dropped. And let's just say this is like 30%. Let's just call it 30. It could be like any number, right? But let's just say now it's dropped to 30%. So if you don't learn anything, but you're always practicing that thing, not without learning something new, remember that you being on this 1L thing that I've drawn right here, that means that whatever you've learned, you're retaining. If you weren't retaining, your curve could be something like this, right, where it goes downward, but it's not, so I'm just going to get rid of that. But just to make sure that we know, you're learning the same, you're not learning anything new, but you are practicing what you've learned. Then you can expect to be on this yellow curve right here, right, this one right here. Now, what's the difference? You're not going to increase your performance output, but you are still performing. Your performance output is still going up. The only thing is it's peaking too early. The way you don't peak early is you keep learning. And, well, I just said that you can keep learning, right? So what's the solution? Can you guess? Well, I may have asked you to pause the video and guess at this point, I don't know. But here's what I would suggest. You take this idea and consider the fact that there's two basic scenarios. One is this and one is this, right? If I kind of merge these, let's just say I merge these scenarios. So now I have a learning curve that looks something like this. Again, this is learning, this is time. You can learn something new initially. So let's just say that's this. And then you can work on reinforcing it. So that's this. You're not learning anything new, but you are reinforcing it, so you're maintaining how much you've learned. That's staying at the same level. Then another, like you say, a day of learning, a day of reinforcing. Another day of learning, another day of reinforcing. And in this way, I would say that this is a lot more sustainable because you can balance things out. If you have days when you need to, say you cannot learn something new, which is totally fine, you can reinforce on those days. Or if you don't reinforce, you may drop a slight bit. But the point is, as long as you continue on the learning curve, you will, well, you're always going to keep going upward, right? And in this kind of, let's just call this a staggered approach. I did not spell that right. Did I spell that right? I hope that's how you spell staggered. I think it is, but anyway, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. So this is the staggered approach to learning, and you want to do this. The thing is, if you take a linear approach, sure, you're learning a lot, but you don't get time to reinforce that learning, and that kind of results in exhaustion. It results in almost boredom. Like you might just be like, bro, I'm learning so much stuff, but I don't remember what I learned on day one. You might be here on the learning curve in this region, and that's like, let's just say that's 150 days, but what you learned in the first 10 days was so far back, and it's just this small part of this entire picture that you don't actually end up learning anything. Like, you don't actually end up retaining anything, which is bad. But with the staggered approach, here's what your performance output would look like. And this is where it's really a game changer. So let me get rid of red because I feel like that color's too much. It's just in your face. Here's a new performance output versus time. So this is your performance output and this is time. In the old one, you were asymptotically approaching something, and if you stopped learning new things but kept practicing, you were asymptotically approaching a different value that was a lot lower. If you do a staggered learning, here's essentially what you're doing. Here's your ideal curve for performance output, right? Something like that, where this is 100%, and okay, you're just approaching it. Again, this is not very accurate in terms of like me drawing it, but you get the idea. And here's what you do when you do staggered learning. This is what happens. The times when you're learning, you're on the curve, upward. Then you reinforce, you flatten out. Now let's just say you've reached this point. At this point, you have flattened out, but you haven't stopped. You have stopped learning new things, but the next day, you know you're going to learn more. The next day you pick up, and okay, I'm saying day. This could be, time scale is obviously a lot more stressed out, especially for things like cubing, where the higher up you get on this learning curve, the closer you're getting to your 100% performance output, but also like it's harder, it's not as easy. So essentially what you're doing with the staggered learning is you're now saying, okay, I can start here because I'm already here. I'm not going to go down since I'm reinforcing. Staggered learning, okay, I stop learning. And continue this process. What do you notice? Well, you may have already noticed what's happening is you are actually approaching this. You are approaching the same result, granted in slightly more time, right? But you have to note that this curve, which now I will use red because why not? This particular curve, this whole thing, that's ideal. That's extremely ideal. And it's not extremely ideal to be on that curve because you will end up basically not doing anything else in life. You might just end up doing one thing, and Sure, if that's what you want to do, then hey, this curve is for you. But if you have other things you need to do, want or need to do, it could be a necessity, right? Then what you actually want to do is follow this blue curve. And I'm writing blue and red, and that's confusing, but like all of this is confusing, to be fair. So this is the idea behind staggered learning, and I really encourage you to do this. And I promise this would yield really good results, because in all these points, or I should say regions, in all of these regions that I'm highlighting now in these red dot circles, you will notice that you get time. You get time to breathe, you get time to reinforce, and that helps you get the freshness that you need to jump onto the next segment of the curve at each point. And you are always, always approaching the ideal curve. Granted, you take more time, but you've also made a better result. Like the quality of your output is going to be much better instead of just an output. So yeah, that's how staggered learning affects it. And yeah, this is like an overall summary of all of the stuff I just mentioned. So one last conclusive statement, which I will do in green because I haven't used it enough. A really key thing about, that's not a good line. A really key thing about the learning curve that you understand is that I cannot draw lines. I'm kidding. That you understand is the fact that, so let's just take the ideal curve, right? Because ideally you're on this curve. Pick any point on the curve and zoom in. So like, let's say I pick this point initially. If I pick this point and I zoom into this, you know what I'll find? I'll find this. Let's just say this point is our new origin. So like I'm setting a new thing with this point as our zero reference, basically. I'm setting this as my new zero reference. I will see this. Or more accurately, I will see this. It's the same thing. I just reduce the slope. Now let me go a point. Let me like traverse along this. Let's say I've learned a lot more, and I'm great on this is again the performance output versus time curve, and I've reached here. Right. Again, I'm going to set this as my zero. And we're going to see what happens. Let's zoom into this. Again, I cannot draw lines for the life of me, but like we move. Again, if I set that as my origin, I will notice this. Keep going. Let's go here. Setting this as my origin. Let's zoom into this. What do we see? Do you notice what's happening? Well, of course, this is not entirely this is not mathematically accurate, obviously. Please don't go measure these angles and be like, oh, but you can't draw a slope of 74 degrees. And I'm like, sorry, bro. I apologize. But my point here is basically, if you look at all three of these, you will notice a trend, which is you're always on the learning curve or the performance output curve. You're always on it. And there's always somewhere to go. Even if you take the topmost point, which that's for the sake of argument. Let's be real. This is extending all the way to infinity, and beyond. No, just to infinity. So, that's my point. At any point on the curve, you're always approaching infinity. This is a limit, right? You're not ever going to get there. You're not ever going to reach 100%. But this is the key to understanding how learning works, because you are always on this curve as long as you learn. And if you do a staggered learning approach, you will spend more time on the curve rather than trying to race up the curve and then burning out and then falling all the way back because you've forgotten what you learned. So in order to avoid burnout, you want to follow this approach, just the staggered learning approach, this particular curve right here. And in order to make sure that you understand where you are on your performance output curve, of course, you got to compare to how you used to be. You got to compare to other people who are amazing at whatever you're doing. Because I guarantee you, pick anything in this world, there's going to be people who are amazing at it. So, yeah, this is basically how it works. And yeah, just make sure you're on the curve, basically. And you may fall behind at some points. You may fall, downward on this curve, but that's totally okay, because as long as you revert to this approach, you will start following these small curves, and you will slowly build your way back up. So, in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to cover. This is how I visualize the learning curve, and this is how I would recommend you look at improvement. So as long as you have the staggered learning approach, you are the only thing stopping yourself from improving. And it's not impossible to implement, because I believe that you can. And if you take the time out to do it, then hey, nothing like it. So yeah, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see how I've implemented this in arguably not very long, and it's very obvious that I know I've had this idea in my head for a long time, but I started doing like 3 style for 3 blind, and then I started learning some square one cube shape algs, which I've spoken about in the previous video. Go check it out here, somewhere, on the top. And yeah, so that's basically what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to learn a method, stay with it, practice it. So I'm doing the staggered learning. So like I would start here, or I would be on one of these, and then go to the flat of these, then go to the flat, then go to these. So this is me doing cube shape on square one, go to the flat. Then I might do some Megaminx PLLs, go to the flat. So every time I'm going to be practicing. When I learn something new, spend some time practicing it, move on to the next thing. And the really key point in all of this is that things could also spill over. So if I learn something new for one event, it could help another event, which is really cool. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful to you, and I hope it wasn't too nerdy. I might do more stuff like this on the channel just because I find it like really fun. So yeah, that I think that's it. That's all for this video, I guess, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care and peace.